Now, Karen Lamoreaux likes to be known as an Arkansas mom. I've seen the interview she had on the Glenn Beck Show. She's been on Fox News. Mostly the internet lit up, the YouTube channel lit up with her testimony before the state school board in the state of Arkansas. And if you give me, you can start making your way up here if you're ready, Karen. She noted that most state school boards are appointed, not elected, and that of the 22 states that are fighting back against Common Core, all are legislative fights. None are state school boards who have seen the light. Let that sink in. She's got teachers across the country asking her, please fight this for us, because teachers who are currently teaching in government schools are told by their leaders, state school boards and on down at times, that they may not speak against Common Core. So teachers rely on parents, that's y'all out there, to stop the Common Core train wreck. The last couple of things I want to mention that, quote, the standards are not the issue. It's the baggage that comes with it, okay? And it's not state-led, it's state-implemented, just like Senator Watson mentioned. So y'all tired of hearing me? You didn't come to listen to me? Karen Lamoreaux, please.
Now, the reason why I'm asking you to do this is because you are going to need the people in this room. Have a seat. We are standing in solidarity together. Because when you take up this cause, you're going to get called a lot of names. Just like she alluded to earlier, they're going to call you a conspiracy theorist. They're going to call you an internet hysteric. They're going to call you a helicopter parent. They're going to call you a Tea Party crazy. You might lose a friend over this. So it's important to surround yourself with like-minded people who believe in liberty and freedom and the American dream and just plain old common sense, right? So before you leave here tonight, exchange some email addresses, exchange some telephone numbers, send each other friend requests on Facebook. Make the people in this room your allies. Get to know them. There is power in numbers. All right? Now, this PowerPoint that I have that I take all over the place is kind of long, and some of the things we've already had some attention to, so some of these slides I'm going to go through really quick, and then others I'll spend more time on. John Dewey said something that rings very true today. He said, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. Which begs the question, to whom am I giving my child's life? To whom am I giving my child's life? Let me tell you who you're giving your child to. Arnie Duncan. Everybody know who he is? He's from Chicago. He's a professional basketball player. He played professional basketball for Australia. Never taught in a classroom in his life. But you know, he's balling down in Chicago with Barry and all of his buddies, and he gets the job of the Secretary of Education. He made some interesting remarks in his 2010 speech to UNESCO. And I want you to write that down. That's something I want you to go home and get online and read. You need to read the 2010 speech to UNESCO, UNESCO. Just Google. Isn't that sad that that's a verb now in our language? Go home and Google Arnie Duncan, UNESCO 2010. And read that speech, because that speech that he gave at the UNESCO conference details, outlines this education reform from start to finish. It gives you a lot of information as to the intention of the standards, the testing, the data, all of that is there. He affectionately refers to our children as human capital, not students, not children, not our greatest resource or blessing or whatever other warm and fuzzy word you can come up with. Human capital. And a lot of the Common Core proponents will use that language too. Now, one thing that really stands out is he says, traditionally, the federal government in the U.S. has had a limited role in education policy. Well, yeah, because that's what it says in the Constitution. It's how it's supposed to be, right? But the current administration has sought to fundamentally shift the federal role. Well, haven't we heard that before? We're just fundamentally shifting everything around. I'm going to fundamentally shift this because it's getting in my way. All right. All right. He goes on. Our goal for the coming year, remember this is in 2010, the year that the standards were adopted, will be to work closely with global partners, including UNESCO, to promote qualitative improvements in systems strengthening. This goal can only be achieved by creating a strong cradle-to-career continuum. And boy, will you hear that phrase a lot in Common Core world. Womb to tomb, cradle to grave, cradle to career, it's all same. Starts with early childhood learning. There's your mandate for universal pre-K. And extends all the way to college and careers. All right. So why is Arnie Duncan at the UNESCO conference talking anyway? Who's UNESCO? How many people in the room know what I'm talking about when I say UNESCO? Can you give me a show of hands? All right. You remember George W.? All right. In 2003, George W. signed the United States up into a cooperative agreement with UNESCO. That's the United Nations, education, scientific, and cultural organization. So UNESCO is the education arm of the UN. There's a lot of media hubbub about that when that happened. You can get online and read all the articles that were in the news, people complaining about that. But it went forward anyway. So, as a nation, we have a cooperative agreement to do education a certain way as mandated by the United Nations. So, let's find out, what are the United Nations ideologies about education? Well, they've got a handbook. It's called, Is There a Way of Teaching for Peace? It says, number 1, downplay nationality, lest the child identify too strongly with their country. Number 2, teach peace as defined by social equity, not just the absence of war. Number 3, teach sustainable development. Oh, Lordy. PA. Okay. Teach local to global activism, execute the objectives, and report back to UNESCO. That is why, ever since we made that agreement, that every year the United States Secretary of Education, whoever that may be, goes to UNESCO and gives a speech. We're holding up our end of the bargain here. Okay. But wait, there's more. Publication number 356. This was part of a 10-part teacher training series published by UNESCO. Now, this one's kind of old. This goes back to the 1940s, but anybody who studies the UN knows not much has really changed with that since the 1940s. As long as the child breathes the poisoned air of nationalism, education and world-mindedness can produce only rather precarious results. As we have pointed out, it is frequently the family that infects the child with nationalism. So, who's getting in the way of the UN? Parents, family. So noted. Okay. Abraham Lincoln said, the philosophy in the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of the government in the next. And this is why our Constitution was designed the way it was, to keep the government out of the schoolroom. So you heard a little bit about race to the top. And I'd encourage you, if you're going to look up something else, if you like to read and research things, get online and look up President Obama's State of the Union address when he announces race to the top. He sounds just like Jerry Maguire. He says, you show us your commitment to these reforms and we will show you money. And he pledges $4.35 billion of our tax dollars from the stimulus package to this effort. Don't tell me the federal government's got nothing to do with Common Core. It's got $4.35 billion to do with Common Core. That's federal tax money. Not only were the states asked to compete for this piece of the financial pie, but they were offered a waiver from No Child Left Behind, you heard that, some of the worst provisions that resulted in the closing of so many of our local schools, but they also threatened our Title I money, and that's a big deal. So there was a great deal of coercion and threat here. It's not like winning the lottery. Now, in these applications, which averaged about somewhere around 300 pages each, there were 4 basic categories that you were scored on or graded on as a state. And those are known as the 4 assurances. Sometimes you hear them called the 4 pillars. Different than the 4 pillars of, I would say, propaganda. The 4 pillars of propaganda are what you gave them. I like to call them the propaganda parade. Here are the 4 things that the states were graded on. Now, it's important for you to understand that when we signed these Race to the Top agreements, they were considered contractual agreements. We are bound to these. Okay? It's not like you fill out an application and if you don't get the grant, it all goes down the drain. No. You're making a commitment to do this regardless before you figure out whether or not you're getting the money. So here are the 4 pieces of Race to the Top. The first one, common standards and common assessments. This infographic can be a little misleading because it says Common Core, and that's not true. What your senator told you earlier was they just had to be common, college and career ready, to the liking of Duncan, standards and new assessments. The second thing we had to make a promise to do was to establish an SLDS, that's a state longitudinal database system, using a P20 model. P as in pre-K. So the goal of this data collection initiative is to individually track our children from age pre-K until they turn 20 and enter the workforce. Are you with me so far? Okay. These are the 2 that I focus on the most. Now 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 happen to be the 2 pieces of this reform that get conservatives riled up. Okay? The Democrats get in when they see 3 and 4. They don't like these. Okay? Number 3 are your teacher accountability systems. So they have these new high-tech computerized teacher evaluation systems, and they got to walk around with these big binders full of paper, then evaluations they got to fill out all day long. They're doing the same thing to teaching that they did to nursing. Our nurses spend more time filling out paperwork than they do taking care of patients, and now our teachers are spending more time filling out paperwork than teaching our kids. And that's all I'm going to say about number 3. And then number 4 has to do with addressing low-performing schools. And you got lots of extra points for expanding the charter movement in your state. So lifting the caps for enrollment and expanding charters gave you extra points there. Okay? So those are the 4 pieces of the Race to the Top reform. The standards themselves are the glue that hold all of those things together. They are the rules that everyone must play by. Your data collection is not going to be analytically sound if everyone's operating and testing by different standards. Your teachers cannot be evaluated across the country by different sets of standards. And they rely on how the kids score on those standards when they take the test to get a certain evaluation. You can't justify the closing of your local schools and the replacement with corporate managed charters unless you have the data to prove that the school is running into the ground. Are you with me? Without these standards, the whole thing crumbles. It's the anchor that holds it together. She mentioned this earlier. This is unconstitutional. This violates 3 federal laws. It violates our 10th Amendment rights. Did you know that only 2 signatures unleashed this monster on your state? Your governor and your state school commissioner, superintendent. 2 signatures. That's not state-led. Where are the parents in this? Not just a taxpayer, but a parent. Where's my voice? I don't get a voice in this. This is also an unfunded mandate. The Fordham Institute, who pretends to be a conservative think tank and was bought by Bill Gates to promote the Common Core, says that it's going to cost the nation $16 billion to execute this after the Race to the Top money runs out. The most money being spent on technology. So when you see your state legislature arguing about increasing your bandwidth and your internet in your schools, this is why. The tests are computer-based. If they don't have internet and computers, they can't execute Common Core. They can't execute PARC. And then they bring in all these lobby groups and they say, oh, but it's for the children. The children have to have internet. Well, sure they do, but you know what? Yale is still using blackboards, for Pete's sake. Give it a minute. Just come out and say it. It's for PARC. All right. Yes. Oh, because there's money to be made there. I'm going to get into that in a minute. Wait till I rail on Gates. All right. Your senator told you about these groups, the NGA, the CCO, DC-based trade groups. The NGA and the CCSSO are lobby groups. So if I'm a governor, I become a member of the NGA because we want to get together and go lobby DC for our interests as governors. They're not there as an elected body to represent you. The purpose of those groups is to go lobby DC. They're private nonprofit organizations, but get this, 50% of their money comes from you. Tax dollars make up 50% of their budget. Don't tell me Common Core has not got anything to do with the federal government. Strike two. They have closed door meetings. You cannot FOI these guys. There's no sunshine laws. You can't demand to see transcripts from the meetings when they were developing these standards. No, that's none of your business. That's their private business. They're not accountable to you. Same can be said for Achieve, which made millions off of this. All three of these groups received federal money for Common Core, and all three of these groups were paid by Bill Gates for Common Core. And they are not accountable to parents. There was a mother, Heather Crossan, in Indiana, proud to stand in solidarity with Heather. A woman was dragging that pack and play up to her Indiana state capitol every week with her t-shirt, Hoosiers against Common Core. The CCSSO was having a meeting in her hometown to talk about the new standards, because you know that you just got math and English right now, but you know there's more coming, right? The science standards, oh, that's gonna be fun. Science and history, social studies are coming down the pike. So anyway, she wanted to sit in on this meeting with the CCSSO because she wanted to learn who was writing these standards and what were they discussing, and they said, no, you can't come in here. Can I at least have a list of the people who are developing? No. Okay. Moving on. Bill and Melinda Gates. Is right. I heard somebody do that. Amen. Oh, Bill Gates wants to change the world. So far, he has spent $240 million on Common Core. And it keeps growing, which is a good thing, really. I get excited. Like last year in September, we made so much noise, he had to throw another $1 million at his public relations people at New Venture. Let's make him spend all his money. $300,000 in Mississippi when you started making noise. Do you know that Bill Gates paid my Department of Education in Arkansas $2 million? Common Core, that came directly to my state. You could look all this up. If you get online, and I'll use my favorite verb again, you Google, as long as you're okay with the NSA knowing, get on there, Google, and just search Bill and Melinda Gates awarded grants. And that will get you into their foundation database. You go into Bill and Melinda Gates awarded grants, and there's a little gray search box. Type the words Common Core, and then you'll hear the angels sing to the tune of $240 million. Oh, there's pages and pages of money being thrown everywhere. This man has bought off everybody that could have anything to say about Common Core. State boards of education, the National PTA, both national teachers unions, the NEA and the American Federation of Teachers, all paid. U.S. Chamber of Commerce, paid. Fordham, paid. Khan Academy, paid. Oh, Jeb, don't get me started on Jeb. Don't get me started on Jeb, yeah. I'm gonna see him in a week or so in Arkansas, and I'm really hoping he and I can have a little talk. He's gonna be at a fundraiser I'm going to. So anyway, he funded Achieve, NGA, CCSSO, you name it. I think between NGA and CCSSO, the last time I looked, it was somewhere around $67 million. Big numbers. You can go in there, you can print it off, you can export it to Excel, search whatever. So the next time you see an article in a magazine or you hear an ad on the TV or the radio, you find out who produced it, and then you go into the awarded grants database and type in their name and find out how much money they got to tell you that, because I promise you they did. I have yet to meet anybody who loves Common Core and talks about it publicly that wasn't paid to do so. Fordham was paid. I mean, all of them. So anyway, Why is Bill Gates interested in education? I mean, isn't he busy poking everybody with a polio stick or something? Why is he inserting himself in education? Isn't that funny? I learned that on this journey a few months ago, that Bill Gates dropped out of college. Don't tell me what's college and career ready when you were making software in your garage. Bill Gates signed a cooperative agreement with UNESCO in 2004. See, it's about more than money. I mean, he's going to make a killing off of this, but he'll tell you he's not, because this money comes out of his foundation. So, it's for the children. It's all charity. Microsoft is going to make a ton off of this. It's about social change. You can read his agreement. You can get online, and you can read the agreement that he signed with UNESCO. It was under the guise of Microsoft, but he personally initialed every part of that cooperative agreement, and you can read it for yourself. And there are two big themes that stand out in the agreement. Why are we doing this with UNESCO? 1, for social change. 2, for global standards. Did you catch that? Global standards, not state standards. That explains why I saw that news article last year about parents in Malaysia complaining about student data mining. That explains why I got an email from a lady in Canada who said, we've been circulating petitions in all of our provinces because all of a sudden we got this wackadoodle math. Oh, that's why students are protesting in the UK over their outcome-based tests. That's why a school in Qatar is using Common Core on their website. Global, baby. Global standards. Let's not just dumb down the American kids. Let's dumb them all down. Bill Gates is the guy behind MSNBC, right? Microsoft, MSNBC. He's got his own little voice, the propaganda parade. Did y'all happen to catch the commercial that they aired in 2013 with Melissa Harris Perry? Okay. If you want to go home and you want to get really mad, get on your Google and search Melissa Harris Perry education commercial. It'll come up. It's on YouTube. There's a big to-do about that in the press too, in case you were sleeping then like I was. I can look it up now. She gets on this commercial, and it aired during a PGA golf tournament in 2013. And I'm paraphrasing here. You watch it for yourself online. But she says, we've got to get over this notion, this idea that your kid is yours and yours alone. These kids belong to all of us. And we've never spent as much on education as we should have. What? Education gets more money out of every state budget than anything else. And hey, you know what? If my kid belongs to her, I've got a little bitty one that's 22 months old. When she wakes up puking at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm calling Melissa Harris Perry. Hey, she's yours. Come deal with it. You will find that there is a particular ideology that is commonplace among the people who push this reform. That ideology is very progressive in nature. It's very collectivist in nature. And if you know your history, I'll let you connect the dots on the last time the world heard these arguments. NBC Learns is an offshoot of this. This is an entire initiative that exists solely to support the Common Core. And they have a little summit every year. It's all sunshine and applesauce about Common Core, compliments of Gates, and probably a little bit of Soros in there too. All right, next slide. What's up with the math? Back in the 90s, these reformers, they tried to pass national standards. Does anybody remember that? They tried to pass national history standards. And the vote failed in Congress 99-1. But they learned a lesson. They said, man, don't start with history in America because that gets people upset. And don't go to Congress. So let's start with math instead. Nobody will notice. And we'll take the back door through the state boards of education. I get a little giggle out of this when I get past the fact that I know my kid's never going to get this year back and the math is detrimental. But the consolation in this is, man, you didn't think the math was going to be what got all these mama bears' attention, did you? For me, the math was what got me into Common Core. And that's been a common theme for so many other parents. It was the math that woke us up. It's the math that woke us up. So what's the deal with the math? This math is not new. Common Core math is not new. It's been around since the 1930s. It goes back to Carnegie. And it's known as constructivism. And we see constructivism in the English language standards too. It's a little bit harder to detect. There's some very disturbing tenets of constructivism, especially if you happen to be a very conservative-minded person. If you're a liberal type person, you may not take so much offense to some of these themes, but conservatives will. Constructivism places emphasis on the method, not the answer. So when you're using a constructivist model of education, it says as long as you can argue it, draw it, explain it, justify it, 2 + 2 can equal 5, as long as you can argue it, because this is about you. This is your day. This is your learning. Do they still require 1984 as required reading? High school, I wonder. They probably should. One of the other disturbing tenets of constructivism is that it uses this whole team approach with all these corporate guys like that. Oh, teamwork, you know. With methods like think, pair, share. If we can get everyone in the room to agree that 2 + 2 is 5, well then by golly, it's 5. No, it's not! Math is a law. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. Constructivism is based on abstract thought. So it takes a mirrored approach to the material. So these particular crazy standards come from none other than the National Council of the Teachers of Mathematics. Doesn't that sound really fancy and uppity and smart and trustworthy? The National Council of the Teachers of Mathematics. You hear a title like that and you're inclined to think, well, these people know what they're talking about. DC reformers. They tried to do this once before. They tried to do this back in 1989, and everybody got mad. And then they revised it and did it again in 2000, and everybody got mad. And then they released another version in 2006, and everybody got mad. It was called Focal Points. So George W. calls this National Mathematics Advisory Panel and says, somebody please put this to rest. Can we please make a decision as to how we're going to teach math in this country, please? So they round up all these experts into this National Advisory Panel. Do you know what they found? You can look it up, read the report online. Constructivism doesn't work, except maybe in remediation. And it leaves our elementary students in danger of not getting it. Around that same time, in 2005, the American Institutes for Research came up with the same conclusion. But by then it was too late, because by 2008, Common Core was already on the train tracks. Bill Gates had founded a company that has since kind of gone under the radar now called Common Core Incorporated in 2007. And in 2008, the NGA and the CCSSO were handing in their benchmarking for success report to Obama before he got his bags unpacked in the White House to sell this thing. So how convenient to be able to take these math methods and get them in the Common Core standards where they are sustainable. And it doesn't matter whether people are like them or not, they're stuck with them. So I encourage you to read about constructivism. The early childhood professional development people have come out saying, hey, over here, see us? You know, your clinical psychologists, your developmental experts, we weren't included in this conversation. There were no early childhood development people on the validation committee or on the development team at Achieve. And by the way, these math standards you're putting out here, they're cognitively inappropriate. Children in elementary school are not wired to think abstract, you dummy. They are in the midst of their concrete thinking phase. They need standard algorithm and they need rote memorization. You know, the same bogus stuff that got us to the moon. So where's my voice as a parent? I don't have one. I can't go to my local school board because I don't have a local school board because the bully bandwagon of educrats in Arkansas consolidated our district. So then I have to go to the state school board. Y'all saw how that went. Nobody's accountable to me. We can't change that. I can't go to my school. I can't go to a school board and say, this math is inappropriate. We have to do something else. Because those standards are under a copyright that's owned by DC. Don't tell me this is state-led. When I have to appeal to some private group 2,000 miles away to fix my kids' math? Where's my voice? They don't care. They don't care what I have to say. I'm in the way. Those early childhood development specialists, 500 of them signed an open letter. You can read it online. Dr. Gary Thompson out of Utah is someone that I suggest you follow. He's very vocal. He calls it cognitive child abuse. This math and this mega testing of this math in New York, who is 2 years ahead of us, is causing our elementary school students to throw up, to wet their pants, to have behavior problems. And you think, you're exaggerating. No, I'm not. It's developmentally inappropriate. You're stressing out the kid. You're creating anxiety, you're creating stress, you're eliciting a physical reaction to this, and it's not a good one. They're abusing our children. Are y'all familiar with Dr. James Milgram? Professor Emeritus from Stanford, NASA Advisory Council member. He was on the validation committee. He refused to sign off, said they're 2 years behind, and they use this crazy math, and nobody else uses this. The other type of constructivist math that's in the standards is the geometry. It's called transformational geometry. We learned Euclidean. He says transformational geometry failed internationally. They wouldn't listen to him. He refused to sign off, so they expunged him from the record. 29 members on that validation committee, 5 refused to sign, 3 speak out, the other 2 don't have tenure yet, so they're being quiet. Zayev Werman is the other math whiz. Refused to sign off, same reasons. No STEM, 2 years behind our international peers. Next slide. You know Sandra Stotsky? She's from my state. Talked to her yesterday. I had the pleasure of speaking with her in Louisiana. She's shorter than I thought she was. Didn't you think so? I walked up and I was like, oh, she's so short. You know what I love to do when the lobbyists in Arkansas like to argue with me about her? I don't know if they tell you guys the same thing, but the lobbyists in Arkansas like to tell me, oh, Sandra just wants to make a profit. She's trying to sell her standards. They're not her standards. They're Massachusetts standards. She doesn't own the copyright to anything. She's not making money off of this. But they like to make that assertion because, ridicule is their most powerful weapon. Anyway, her list of credentials is a mile long. Look her up. She's amazing. She's taught for years in K through 12. She's got every licensure under the sun. She's been published all over the world. She's a standards expert, which is hard to find. And yet we're supposed to listen to a guy like David Coleman from Achieve, who's never taught in a classroom in his life, who couldn't get a teaching job in New York even though he tried. She calls the ELA, or the English Language Arts Standards, an empty skill set. Says they will not prepare our children and that they just obliterate literature. One of the problems that she mentioned to me, we were at breakfast one day, she said, our teachers are trained, English and literature teachers are trained to teach from literature, not informational text. So just like the math, we got to go retrain all the teachers. To heck with the 4, 6, 8 years they spend in school learning and perfecting their craft. Bill Gates has a better idea. Let us tell you how we think you should do your job. This assault on literature in favor of informational text is going to destroy our history. It's going to kill our stories. If you want to know where that comes from, that 50% to 70% informational text, in case you got a lobbyist that's arguing with you, and they say, show me where it is in the standards. Have they done that to you yet? Show me where the data mining is in the standards. It's not in the standards, you dummy. It's in the MOU. You have to look at the appendix. Common Core State Standards Initiative, Appendix B. And in the appendix, you will find two things of note. One, you will find the little graph that says that all of the students start out with a 50-50 split of informational text and established literature, and then from, I think it's 7th grade, up to 12th grade, it goes up to 70%. So this means that our seniors in high school, their emphasis will be 70% informational text. What is informational text? Newspaper articles, magazine articles, YouTube videos. Reference. Not all informational text is bad, right? If you like dinosaurs and you want to read about dinosaurs, most of what you read is going to be reference. That's going to be informational text. But that's not what they're having them read. And the problem with informational text as a whole is that it seeks to convince the reader of an idea. It seeks to make a point, right? Okay? You see the slippery slope there? And when you look at the Common Core State Standards list of exemplar works, which I suggest you Google that too, Common Core State Standards Initiative, exemplar reading list, download it, you will see exactly what they mean and what they recommend by informational text. Like a government document from the New Yorker or some crazy current events magazine about the healthcare problem in McAllen, Texas. Where do you think that's going? They love to tout that the Common Core State Standards make our kids critical thinkers. Oh, all of a sudden, nobody in America knows how to critically think and the teachers don't know how to teach it. What? Reading informational text doesn't make you a critical thinker. Give me Shakespeare. Give me Thoreau. Give me Charles Dickens. Give me Jane Eyre. Give me different cultures, different time and place, complex vocabulary, complex characters. Put me in that story. That will teach me how to critically think. Don't hand me some government document about energy policy and expect that's going to make me a critical thinker. No. Next slide. I'll skip that in the interest of time. All right. We're in the PARC Consortium with you. Yay, yes. Stands for the Partnership for the Assessment, Readiness for College and Careers. And that's the new test that's part of Assurance Number 1 with the standards. When we filled out that Raise the Top application, we were required to enter into one or two of these consortiums. There's PARC, and then the other one is called Smarter Balanced. PARC is actually the lesser of those two evils, and I'll tell you why. PARC is very much, Smarter Balance is very much an adaptive test. So it means that if the student's doing poorly, the test changes with the student and it becomes easier. It adapts to the student. Now PARC does that to a certain degree, but not to the extent that Smarter Balanced does. Smarter Balanced, their biggest investor, Rupert Murdoch, recently partnered, Smarter Balanced Test Consortium recently partnered with the American Institutes for Research. Do you know who funds them? Soros. Now, since we're in the PARC Consortium, let's talk about that. Both of these consortiums got federal dollars. That's right. The federal government is paying for the test that your child is taking. Can you say conflict of interest? That's a little suspect if you ask me. That's a little unconstitutional. Okay, so PARC got $186 million of that little pie. Did you know that as a state, we have to pay $250,000 a year just to be a member of that consortium? What a waste of taxpayer dollars, especially when they've got a crappy test. The cost of the test is not fixed. You know, it might say we had the Iowa the Iowa test of basic skills, and that was some flat $20-something rate per test. We can budget against that. But the cost of the Park test fluctuates depending on how many states are in the consortium. It's kind of like a group insurance plan. And 11 states have already bailed from Park. And every time a state leaves, the cost of the test goes up. So is Mississippi going to be on that sinking ship? Not if she gets her bill passed. The other interesting thing, and I don't know if this was the case with your Mississippi curriculum test, but it was for us in Iowa, we had some transparency as parents with that test. So if my kid took the test and just completely bombed it, I could request to see the test, and I could see how my child answered the questions. And we were guaranteed by law to see at least 50% of the test. So if I'm concerned about what my child's reading when they sit down to answer those questions or how they answered, I have that. Not so with Park. The teachers have to sign a confidentiality agreement saying that they will not disclose what they see on that computer screen. They're making students sign a confidentiality agreement. There were first graders in my state being asked to sign a confidentiality agreement before they sit down for a test. That is nuts. No voice.
I'm an educator. We're not allowed to even look at the question.
I believe it.
Like, that's always, we're not saying we can't say what we see. We're not allowed
Not allowed to look. Can you say shady? What's constitutional about that? My tax dollars paid for that test. I ought to be able to see it. Ugh. And then there's Pearson Education. Pearson Education is a UK-based company. They're not even an American company. And you need to look up these guys. Their education advisor is Sir Michael Barber. This guy, if you ask me, is a complete sociopath. He's written a book called Deliverology 101. You should peruse that on your Kindle. This guy's got a complex. Self-proclaimed educational revolutionary. He has been running the show in the UK education system and tanking it very quickly. Sir Michael Barber at Pearson believes in global standards. He believes in outcome-based mega-testing education. And he believes in Mark Tucker's philosophy that you heard earlier about workforce steering. The common theme that you see with this reform is that this is all done through private-public partnerships. So you've got these private corporations coming in here who are not accountable to us. We can't FOI them. We can't elect them. They don't care what we say. They're accountable to shareholders. So who are the shareholders of Pearson Education? Across the pond, their second or third largest shareholder is the Libyan Investment Authority. Gaddafi's kid, who's now in prison for terrorism. Now, Pearson says, oh, we just can't believe it. And the assets are frozen. Okay. But you know, that explains a lot. Because Pearson owns about 3/4 of the education publishing market. All of those publishers that we grew up with, like Scott Forsman, Penguin, McGraw-Hill, several others, they've all been swallowed by the Pearson whale. It's hard to find education books that are not published by Pearson these days. They dominate the market. There was a story in Florida, Volusia County, Florida last year, big uprising there by parents because it was either a geography or a social studies book that dedicated 34 pages to Islam. And a little bit of paragraph about Christianity and everything else under the sun. There were parents in that county burning those books. Good for them. So that tells you a lot about where their influence is. These are the guys writing our test. In my book, No Choice, No Voice, in the back, there's an appendix where I have shared with you a list that another coalition person has compiled that has over 32 infractions on Pearson for either having revisionist history in their books or screwing up test scores. And they just last year settled a lawsuit for $7 million for accidentally making a profit with their nonprofit. And then the money that they had to pay as a result went to Penguin, who they own. Okay, so that's Pearson for you. Oh, and in 2011, Pearson and Microsoft, they partnered. Next slide. Next one, I covered all that. Oh, no, let me tell you what was on that last one. There's another thing that Sir Michael Barber said that you need to know because we're seeing it happen now. He says to policymakers in education, he says, you need to look at sustainable reform. And I'm not talking about sustainable development. I'm talking about sustainable reform, reform that sticks. He says, work on the minds of parents and teachers because of their wish for the past and make it so they can never go back to the way it was before. That is from the mouth of Pearson Education. Not in my country. Now, this is an example of how Pearson wishes to execute the workforce steering piece of this reform. This is what they want to do with the kids' PARCC test scores and all the other data that's attached to their student ID. They want to create an individual profile, complete with a picture and everything, all their test scores, their demographic information, give them what they should do for a living and where they should go to school. Next slide. That's from a Pearson marketing video. So where does the data collection come from? Look, if one of those silly Common Core lobbyists says, well, you can't prove that there's any data collection in the Common Core. Oh, yes, I can. You need to look at your PARCC MOU. An MOU is a Memorandum of Understanding. There are two MOUs at play here. We signed one to get the standards, and then we signed another one for the PARCC testing agreement. When you get that agreement, and you can FOI that, that's how we got it, okay, from your Department of Ed, you find these two clauses in that contract that state that Mississippi must provide timely, don't make us wait now because we're the federal government, we do everything really fast, and complete access to any and all data collected at the state level. Producing all student level data. The Department of Ed says, oh, we're not collecting and sharing data on your students, and anything we've ever shared before is aggregate. Not anymore. We've entered into a contract with Pearson and the federal government to give them individual student data. And it's not that the state's going to give it to them. It goes into the state longitudinal database via Pearson. And so the government just takes it. There's no one in the State Department of Ed that's going to be saying, here's the data. They won't even see that transaction. It is accessed. Next slide. You see, it's illegal for the federal government to have a national student database. That's against the law. But in 2002, there was an amendment that passed that changed the rules of engagement and said, well, you know what you can do? What you can do is you can give all the states a model to work against. It says if everybody uses this model in the same system, then we can interface those state databases. And with a few keystrokes at the federal level, what do you got? De facto national database. And that's exactly what happened. So late 90s, early 2000s, we started seeing these state longitudinal data systems being put in. You know who gave the most money to the state of Arkansas for our database? The Department of Labor. $18 million. Why? Workforce steering. Where do they want to take us? They want the German model. They want a managed economy. These reformers don't like free market capitalism. They want a managed economy. They want to direct it. So they use this P20 model. And I'll say this to the Department of Ed. You may say this to the Mississippi Board of Education, and they'll say, oh, yeah, but there's this law called the FERPA law that protects you. You're protected by FERPA. And then you do what I did, and you go, what's a FERPA? It's the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act. That act was relaxed by Arne Duncan and Company in 2011. And they made two big changes to that law. The first big change that they made is they changed the definition of personally identifiable information. PII is no longer just your name, your social, your date of birth, and all that. It now includes your behavioral profile, facial characteristics, facial expressions, your DNA sequence, all your medical information, all your test scores, everything. Everything. And then they reduced the need for parental consent to a best practice. Well, you know how that's going to go. It's not going to happen. So what that means is they changed the law to say that the education entity, the school, Pearson, whoever, can collect data, be it biometric or otherwise, from my child, store it, and share it, and I got no voice. I seem to remember something in the Constitution about a search and seizure. Yeah. It's illegal. It's illegal. All right. Now, there are two models that your state can choose from. You can take the National Education Data Model or the CEDS, the Common Education Data Standards, and you can look these up online. Just Google those acronyms, you'll get to their websites. You can download the list of data elements. Go to CEDS, CEDS.gov, and you can print off the list of the 400 plus pieces of data they want on our kids, and it's not just the kids, they're tracking data on the teachers too. It's important for you to find out which version your state obligated itself to, because they keep changing the list and reposting it for public comment. Like, we found out that our state uses version 2.0, not version 4.0, which is up there now. And it's the 2.0 version, when you download it, that you see the really horrendous things like your religious affiliation, voting status, things like that. That's none of their business. All right. There's the thing about FERPA. We can skip that. Almost done. I know you're getting antsy. Let's just go through that video. I'll just tell you what that is. That's the guy, he's the CEO from eScholar. And eScholar just came to Arkansas, actually. Our state got a contract with these guys. He was at an event called Education Data Palooza. No joke. Held at the White House in 2012, Education Data Palooza. And all these CEOs of these big data companies are all, kumbaya with each other about how they're going to use all this big data. This is exciting stuff. We're going to do all these great things in education. Talking about our children's personal information as if it's just something out in the open for them to take, as if it doesn't belong to anybody. And how they're going to use it. And here in this slide is part of his presentation where he ties it to the Common Core. Here's how we're going to use Common Core data to pigeonhole your kid. Data Palooza. All right, keep going. Keep going. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorites. Any C.S. Lewis fans in here? He says, when education is beaten by training, civilization dies. We're not teaching. We're training for the 21st century global economy. Next slide. All right, so do I have any homeschoolers in here? Do I have any private schoolers in here? All right, here's what you're up against. The GED. Lots of homeschoolers take the GED for their high school diploma. Guess who bought it? Yay! And almost overnight, the cost tripled. Imagine that. One of the coordinators in my home state who teaches the prep classes and proctors that test says they've never had a bigger failure rate in their life because these people can't get the math. The ACT is aligning. They are corporate partners in all of this. The SAT is aligning. Now, David Coleman, who was the president of Achieve, who was hired to write the standards, David Coleman was the chief ELA author. He is now the president of the College Board. Wasn't that convenient? And the College Board owns the SAT, and so of course now they're in the process of aligning the SAT to all this wackadoodle Common Core stuff. They also own the Advanced Placement Program. And in case you haven't heard, there's a big deal with the AP History standards right now. You need to read about that. So that is the threat to the homeschoolers, because you have to sit for those same exams. Private schoolers, you have to sit for those same exams, and you may not be learning their crazy methodologies. And if they force you to take the PARCC test, now we got a problem. Next slide, almost done. So where are they taking us? They are taking us to national control without accountability, workforce steering through data mining, a managed economy, and globalism, all of which are completely anti Or shall we say UN, un-American? Right? Next slide. So what do? I've given you all this information and you're like, what? Oh no, they didn't. What do you do now? Not everybody can get up here and speak. I'm a loud mouth. I get to put that to a good cause. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody feels comfortable having a face-to-face with their legislature or testifying at the Capitol or something like that. But everybody can do something. What do? You shine a light. When you turn the light on, the cockroaches scatter. So shine a light. This is my favorite quote. You know, when that YouTube video went viral, it scared the beans out of me. I didn't want my name all over the internet. I was afraid people would Google Earth my house and come to my house, you know. And I was afraid that the media would have a field day with me, and they didn't. Everything that I've received has been positive. It's got 1.4 million hits and not a single hate mail. But someone from another state who I've never met, my Facebook got bombarded when that happened. She sent me this quotes from Marianne Williamson, and she says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. As we liberate from our own fear, our presence will automatically liberate others." So when you can get yourself to the point where you're not afraid of this anymore, and you can present yourself in such a way that you're speaking intelligently and you're calm and not, oh my God, this guy is falling. When you get to that calm place, you become a light. And your mere presence around other people will cause them to light up. And that's how grassroots works. So, maybe you are a good writer. So you write a letter to your legislator, or you write to the editorial, letter to the editor. Maybe your gift is of gab over coffee, so you invite your Pokino girls or your Bunko girls or your poker buddies, and you bring it up in conversation with them, and you wake them up and get them involved. Or maybe you go and you talk to your teachers, you talk to your school board. Everybody has something that they can do. Put them in little things, make a big difference. All the different things you can do. Share articles on social media. Little things. It doesn't have to be big. You don't have to make a big deal of it. Next. All change is not growth. And all movement is not forward. This is not taking us forward. This is taking us in a direction that is not in line with our Constitution, that is not aligned with our family values. I thank you for listening to me today. And I hope that you'll get my book, No Choice, No Voice, and read it. It tells you everything you need to know about Common Core. Go out there and be a light, and let's get together again in a year or so and celebrate the fact that we put this thing in the dustbin of history forever.
Wow.
I think Karen is probably the best, most articulate Common Core spokesperson that I have ever heard since I've been in this battle.
That was filthy.
And I want to thank her.
Gracious. All right, look, it's 8:45. I'll be here as long as you want. I'm sure Angela will do the same. I'm sure Karen will do the same. If you have some questions, some specific questions you want to ask, we will field anything that you want to throw out. So take the floor. We got a microphone here if you want that. To those that have to go, take your time. Thank you for coming. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, great. Look, I don't mind calling folks out. Sometimes it gets me in trouble, but it is what it is. We've got to contact the Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker of the House, the Chairman of Education in both the Senate and the House. Those are our 4 targets right now. And by targets, I mean email, phone call, letters, you name it. You've got the information now.
And your own legislators, talk to them.
The House, your House members.
Your House members. Your Senate members are here. Your House members, approach your House members.
There have been changes in our Congress, in the legislature in my area, so I have to figure out who it is, and
Those changes will go into effect the next election,
Yeah.
so your current are still the same.
Yeah.
So you know who they are now.
And one thing,
You know who it is, and I'm afraid it's like talking to the wall, but I'll try again.
But you'll be able to lay your head on your pillow, knowing that you did what you could
one
do.
thing I want y'all to Google
I know you will.
that Karen brought up before I forget it. She made me think about this when she started talking about Arnie Duncan. Google the Arnie Duncan Charlie Rose interview. You need to Google that. It talks about 21st century community-based schooling. And Arnie Duncan sits down with Charlie Rose and basically says that they want all kids in public school from an early age, and they want kids in school 6 to 7 days a week, 12 hours a day through public-private partnerships. That is their goal for 21st century community-based schooling. They want your kids in school 7 days a week for 12 hours a day. That is what Arnie Duncan, the current chief of education for the United States, it's out there, so I want you to Google that. So this is deep, folks.
Seen that before? Yes, ma'am.
The student privacy protection opt-out, is this a legal document? Do they have to abide by this if you send it to the school?
Yeah. And
All right.
One thing.
That particular form is the best one that I've found. It's from the Thomas More Law Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan. There's a chapter about this that I dedicated in my book that outlines all the protections, but according to the Supreme Court, you as the parent have the fundamental right to direct your child's education. You can refuse anything. However, you do have to read your state laws, and if you have questions about that, you've got two good people here that you can come to find out what the consequences are for not taking that test. If Mississippi state law says that they're a high-stakes state and they can hold your child back, then you may be contending with that.
We're gonna have, that is, she's dead on. Now, to that point though, I've sent that to our Senate attorneys, and I've asked them, look at our laws, let's draft something for Mississippi, and I'm gonna make that real public.
Oh, that's
when we
great.
get it. But great question. Yes, ma'am.
I have heard that Lee County schools have already opted out.
Florida.
That was overturned.
Well,
Lee County, Florida was overturned. The board member got a bunch of pressure from a lobby group, called the board back into a meeting a couple days later, rescinded her vote.
this is heated. You're going to be called a lot of things, so just get ready for that. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I got two things. First, did anybody else find it odd that we got this notation that you could have the dentist appointments and they would do your child with the school nurse? That was a very red flag to me. I was like, this is really strange. No, I'll take my child to the dentist, thank you. Secondly, I'm the parent of a special needs child in a community-based program. Where does this take them? Where does it take them?
It takes them down a road where they have very little choices, and it takes away the American dream.
Right. I know my child is going to be limited, but I want her to be the best that she can be. We already practice being a checker at Kroger or at Walmart. When we do the automated thing, I make her practice. I'm the customer, she's the checker.
Can my daughter come over?
Yeah.
The Secretary of Education,
Yeah.
recently came out and said that he wants all of our special needs students to be accountable to these high-stakes tests, that they need to be taught to that test, and that they need to be held to that same standard. And yes, that is cognitive child abuse. So we need to get that basketball player out.